Welcome back. I'm Carissa and I have started my Master Gardener's training. It is well underway. We have done numerous topics and I have recorded them all for you, put them into a series. If you are interested, I will link the series below. The other topics we've covered are botany, soil fertility, soil structure, composting, what is a herbaceous plant. There's tons of different topics there and only more to come. I've really enjoyed my training so far. Today's topic was very applicable to my climate. So we are in a dry, semi-arid climate here in BC. We are in the interior of BC, not the coast, Vancouver. Everybody knows about Vancouver. It's very lush. Huge redwoods, very similar to Oregon and Washington. Here in the interior of BC, it is a lot more dry and it gets very hot in the summer. So today's topic is being water wise. It is something that we need to be thinking about probably globally, as water has been a concern recently in all of our environments. I know last year we had a drought. The water we use for irrigation is city water. We have a well, but it is not functioning, which we might need to look into. But unfortunately, we were restricted last summer during our drought conditions, and we were unable to water at times. And that's a challenge as gardeners. So moving forward, I am going to be planting more drought-tolerant varieties and just being a little bit more mindful. And this presentation was super helpful and thorough with that topic. So there is a term we use in our region called Xeriscaping, and it comes from the word Xera in the Greek, which means dry, and scap, which is from the Anglo-Saxon language, and that means view. So dry view, dry landscape. Some of the misconceptions about being water conscious in landscaping design is that you are going to have numerous rock beds, you know, the odd yucca plant, very limited in your design, grasses, and not a lot of green, when in fact you can achieve a very abundant and green looking landscape while using water conservation methods. So what are the reasons why we should be wanting to conserve water anyway? Different reasons would be for our environment. If we care about what's going on around us in nature, we need to be mindful about water. Here's a statistic: 50 to 80% of our water use is for our yards. That is a ton of water, and if we can conserve that, maybe even drop it in half, I think we will benefit from it. Being mindful about how your water flows, just being mindful of runoff and the different pollutants that can travel through our storm drains and into our rivers and streams. It also saves money. Our water here is metered. So if we are in a certain category or grouping, we are charged a certain amount. And once we exceed that, we are charged a lot more. If your water is metered, you will definitely save money by conserving your water. Saving time. Using a Xeriscape or a water-wise landscaping method could even save you time in gardening, because typically once they're established, they can be lower in maintenance and weeding and even mowing if done correctly. And the last benefit would be that they are beautiful. Like I said, they are not rock beds with the odd yucca plant. They can be very abundant, very green, and very beautiful to look at when done correctly. So there are 7 principles to xeriscaping or water-wise landscaping. The first one is planning and design, and then soil, appropriate plant selection, practical turf areas, watering wisely, mulching, and maintenance. So the first principle is planning and designing. And most of us gardeners really enjoy getting out a piece of paper and sort of mapping out what our dream garden would look like. But using a few different tips, you can create a beautiful plan with also saving some water as you go. So determine your wish list. What plants do you have to have? Being water-wise doesn't mean that you can't have certain plants that do like water, but just being mindful and maybe grouping plants that use more water together to create sort of an oasis. And maybe having drought-tolerant zones surrounding your oasis would be a good idea. And then you win it both, right? You get your dream plants, but you're also saving water along the way. Determine your budget, your time, your phases. Maybe you want to do this in phases. Sketch out maybe a few of your landscaping ideas. Year 1, what are you hoping to achieve? What are you able to spend? Year 2, what are you going to phase in? And just sort of dream and start to plan. I think planning will help a lot with using this design method. When you are sketching out your map, make sure to include all the elements that are currently existing. Being aware of where your house is, where your shade is, where your wind pattern is. All of those elements are important in creating a new design. And lastly, for your planning and designing, encourage water conservation within your plan. So avoid steep slopes. If it is feasible for you to create terraces in your garden, it is a wonderful way to stop the runoff and sort of keep that water table a little bit more consistent. When you're dealing with slopes, to eliminate erosion, it is a good idea to use ground cover. Ground cover is a wonderful idea also for maintaining your soil's moisture. Like I said, a lot of our water consumption comes from using it on our lawn. So reducing the amount of lawn, being aware of how much you actually use. Most of us have too large of a green space anyway, or a lawn area. But if your kids aren't maybe using all of your yard or your animals or pets or for your own enjoyment, it's a consideration to maybe cut back the size of your lawn. Consider adding a cement or concrete or a paver patio. Those areas do not need water and thus will save you water as well. Consider using your drain water. I know a lot of people are using rain barrels. Even allowing your drain water to drain into a bed that can handle a little bit more moisture is a good idea to use that water that you're going to get anyway. The second principle is soil. And I did a whole video on soil health and fertility, the structure of soil, composition and texture, all of those different things. It is a huge topic. This is the basic knowledge you need for soil when you're thinking about conserving water. So soil is used by plants for support, water, oxygen, and nutrients. Understanding how your soil specifically is made up will help you to determine how your plants take up water, how much they use, and how much they need. More soil characteristics are texture, organic matter content, soil life, your pH, drainage, salinity, and fertility. All of these things are things gardeners should be aware of. It helps you in plant selection, it helps you in your fertilizing plan to diagnose problems. Understanding your soil is a very, very big benefit, and one that I look forward to understanding my own native soil in my area a little bit more this coming year. Some reasons why your soil might be a little bit unbalanced or maybe infertile would be from a disturbance from construction. If your home has recently been built, you might have some construction debris that is causing some fertility issues in your soil. Excess traffic. So if you are constantly walking on your garden beds, you are compacting your soil, and that is a detriment to your plants. Being aware of what your soil pH, your fertility is in your native surrounding area will really help you to determine how to fertilize your soil. And understanding how much organic matter to add. I've heard that even adding 25% to the existing soil of organic matter just does amazing benefits to your soil. Using too many chemical fertilizers or synthetic fertilizers is also a concern when you're talking about soil health. The basics to improve your soil would be adding organic matter. Organic matter not only helps to hold the moisture in your soil, it also improves the structure of your soil, whether it's fine or clay soil. Adding organic matter can also lower your pH, which is something that we have to deal with. We have a high pH in our area. And then being aware of what is needed. Knowing how to add lime or sulfur to your garden to balance out that pH is a good idea to start with as well. If your garden is near the road and your roads are cleared and salt is spread in the wintertime, that is another consideration. That is something called leaching. The salt does affect your soil health, and it's something to be aware of. And some plants can tolerate a little bit more salt than others, so being mindful of plant placement, again, is always a good idea. Appropriate plant selection. This is principle number 3. Like I said at the beginning, we are not limited. When we are creating gardens that conserve water, you have abundant selection to create a beautiful landscape. Do a quick Google search. Type in your area and maybe approved or drought tolerant plants that are in your area. I'm sure municipalities in your area will have a list of plants that they encourage you to plant in order to conserve water. Typically, native plants are a little bit more drought tolerant and more adapted to your conditions that you are dealing with. So like I said in the design process, just being aware of where your sun comes, where your wind, and where you need shelter. Even planting a tree or a shrub for privacy or protection from the heat is a wonderful idea to help you conserve. Ground covers, like I mentioned, will help you with maintaining that moisture level. Reducing your lawn will also. Some of the characteristics of a plant that requires less water would be a cut leaf, maybe a smaller leaf, a darker leaf. Gray leaves typically need less water, and a hairy leaf. Just some of the plants that are on our approved list for being a little bit more drought tolerant are ornamental grasses, chokecherry, sumac, which has a tendency to spread, so keep in mind, barberries, which are not invasive in our area, red twig dogwood, which gives you a really nice interest, 9 barks, lilacs, spireas, hostas, blue sedge, burning bush, winter creeper, snow and summer, ajuga, lamb's ear, daylily, heuchera, coreopsis, iris, rudbeckia, Russian sage. Those are just some of the plants on our approved list, and I think just by that list shows you that you can have numerous different textures and colors, sizes and shapes in your garden while still conserving water. So when you are doing your plant selection, here are some more things to consider. Mature size. Just to eliminate future problems, be very mindful about when you're placing your tree or your shrub or your plant, what the mature size it'll get to. And typically on the plant tag, it might say a little bit smaller than your area might grow. For example, our elderberries in our area probably get double the size the plant tag comes in. So a quick Google search or talking to your local nursery will give you a lot of information on how to select the right plant for the right space. If you're planting a plant that requires a lot of water and you're planting it in a very windy spot, that's another consideration. That exposure will increase the amount of water that that plant needs as it dries out. So just consider if your area is windy or protected, sunny or shady, and all those different elements while you're selecting your plants. Keeping in mind that your landscape adds value not only to your own benefit, your property value, your enjoyment of life, creating a balanced yard is probably something to consider, right? We are wanting to conserve water, but we are also not wanting to be too limited that we don't even enjoy the landscape we are creating. Lastly, considering the maintenance needed for your plants. Choosing more native plants will probably eliminate some of the maintenance needed and some of the pruning. Allowing plants to grow the way they typically grow will probably eliminate some of that pruning and maintenance as well. Principle number 4 is practical turf areas. The title for this one is turf and not lawn because there are alternatives to turf. A clover lawn is a great alternative. I've started to seed my grass with clover seeds because clover seems to stay green all summer, even during drought. It requires less water and it's also beneficial for your pollinators. Changing that sort of status of everyone needs, you know, the golf green lawn when we're looking to conserve water. Historically, great expansive lawns were seen as a sign of wealth, and I think as we're understanding about how things work, being a little bit more mindful and environmental friendly, I think we're understanding that maybe a green lawn isn't always a great idea. So understanding that lawns do have a place in our yard, right? If you have children, pets, or if you just enjoy sitting out on the nice grass, it has such a nice cooling effect. And remember, creating a balance, right? Maybe shrinking the size of your lawn and determining what size you actually need and will use. Principle number 5 is watering wisely. So the first question we ask ourselves is how much? And that is so dependent on many, many different things. Your soil type, your weather, your location, wind exposure, the type of plants that you're watering or type of lawn that you're watering. It depends on a lot of different things. So I think really understanding what plants we have in our yard and observing will give us the best answer in how much water to give. A good rule of thumb though is to do a deep and thorough, infrequent water. Encouraging our roots to go down deep and really to absorb that water it happens when we are watering deep. So that water is not just at the surface, but we're encouraging the roots to go down and create larger root systems and really seek out that water source. And something I found interesting was that wilting is not always a sign of underwatering. Sometimes if you have overwatered your plant, it will also wilt. So looking for that crusting of the leaf or the browning of the leaf will give you a true look into that plant if it does need water. Getting your hands in the soil will also help you to determine how dry your soil is and how often you need to give your gardens that water. I've heard of a test you can do as well by putting on your sprinklers, your zones, and placing a cup outside and timing it to see how much water you actually get in a specific time. So say you set your sprinkler for 10 minutes and you get a half a cup of water, and then you move your sprinkler or you turn on another zone, and it really helps you to see how much water you're getting, because your irrigation system or sprinkler or hose gives out a certain amount of water based on many different factors, including water pressure. So it's hard to actually know how much water you're getting until you measure it yourself. Principle number 6 is mulching. Mulching greatly reduces the amount of water you need because you are covering the soil and holding in that moisture. So other benefits would be preventing wind erosion, right? It is that soil is protected. It smothers weeds. It improves water absorption. It prevents water erosion. It reduces evaporation. and it reduces temperature fluctuation. So I think most of us know the benefits of mulching and why we need to do it. The depth of mulch needed is about 3 inches, generally for thick, and slightly less if you are using smaller particles, and about 4 inches if you are using large pieces. The most preferred time to mulch would be spring after your soil temperature has warmed up and your ground has thawed, but really any time is a good time to mulch. As I mentioned in our woody stems video, keeping away from your trunk and not mulching directly around the base of your tree is a great idea so that that trunk doesn't rot. Landscape fabric has a place in our yards. I think a lot of people like to use it for pathways, and it does have a purpose, but being aware that it does have limitations. It can become ineffective as organic matter does come onto the surface of that landscape fabric. Weeds can grow actually above the landscape fabric, so it doesn't always help with what it's supposed to be helping with. The last principle is principle number 7, which is maintenance. So just for lawns, mowing your grass infrequently and leaving it a little bit longer is a great practice as well. It provides shade for your lawn, and also mulching your grass cuttings. That also provides nutrients for your grass. I think about 25% of what your grass needs is created in that grass clippings. Some other maintenance in being water-wise, be adding organic mulch yearly or as often as you can to your gardens. Organic mulch really helps with the moisture content in our soil. Maintaining our plants, dividing when they have become too large or unruly, transplanting as needed is a great idea too, just to make sure that our beds are spaced out accordingly and equally able to absorb the water. And last comment for lawns would be to aerate, dethatch, top dress, and overseed your lawn. All of those practices will help with a healthy lawn and thus require less watering. So there you have it. Those are the tips to have a water-wise garden. I think it's a great idea just to be a little bit more conscious. Even if we're keeping some of those plants that we really love that require a little bit more water, but just being mindful and grouping them if that's possible, and getting out to observe our gardens and maybe even cutting back on water. Maybe we're overwatering already and we don't need to be giving our yards as much water as they have. I really enjoyed this topic, and I hope that you learned a couple things as well. I encourage you to maybe do your own research, Google drought tolerant plants, and maybe plug some into your own climate if that's what your local environment needs. My next episode will be on native plants, and I'm very excited about that. It goes hand in hand with using drought tolerant plants and saving water. So I think all of these topics really work well together. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.